straightforward, as you can see by the proud logo, right? So it's not something very amateurish, at least the way they're branded, right? What they do is there is a series of comedians who travel around Europe, right? And they have a plot there, which is also very funny. So it's not even a plot. It just, there is a woman trying to discover her sort of remote family throughout Europe, right? That's the plot. Everything else is generated. So they have sketches. You can actually go and say, well, I want this woman to go to this particular town and meet those particular people and do so and so, right? And then the rest of the community can actually vote and say, well, we also think it would be cool if she goes there. So there is a wiki for plots. And all episodes are 4 or 5 minutes, right? So here, 75% of the show's content is actually driven by users and by fans who would actually want to see this particular comedy show to do what they wanted to do, basically, right? And they are, I really recommend to check it out because they have that's an example of an episode, right? So somebody created some sort of parts of a dialogue, somebody else would step in and create the second part of the dialogue. It's sort of very anarchic, right? And they have an extremely well-organized mobilization system, right? All videos are released on YouTube, right? They have this Twitter account, which I told you about, right? Where you can say what you had for lunch, right? They have those comedians updating their Twitter accounts, always saying, well, what they're up to at the moment, right? And you see many people following them. They release photos of their trips on Flickr, right? So people can follow them on Flickr. I mean, it's a really multi-dimensional system in which they manage to mobilize the community to do something, right? So people follow them on all of those social networks, and they know what they want from those people. They want those people to go to the website and edit a plot. Right? And then it works. And it works just because I think the format is correct. Like we had that movie, which was a total failure, where users generated a lot of the plot developments as well, Snakes on a Plane. And the problem is, again, you should understand, I was mentioning it at the beginning, that it doesn't, you can't have 10 people write a good book, unless it's academic book. Right? It's very hard to get very nice creative fiction writing done by 10 people or 20 people or 1,000 people, right? If it's long enough, right? If it's just short sketches, right? Maybe you can do it. But if it's a full-length movie starring Samuel Jackson, and sort of 2 hour long, probably it wouldn't, and it didn't work in this case, right? So they had forums, they had wikis, they had blogs. They tried to incorporate all sorts of feedback from the fans, from fans of Samuel Jackson and who's not. It didn't work out. It was a total commercial failure, right? So again, you have to be very careful which projects you decide to open up to this community sort of interaction. Yeah, I'm sure even for this movie, they could have chosen very small bits, particular episodes, right, or particular types of activities which could have been left to the community. I don't know how much I should actually dig into radio. Well, I'll just dig into rough cuts, for example. It's just one, right? Again, an example of how a radio station is proactively using new media in order to launch a new talk show. I mean, what they do, Rough Cuts, it's a blog belonging to National Public Radio in the US. But what they do is they test the new shows that they want to launch through a blog. So what they would do is they would put out pilot editions of a radio show. Right? The show hasn't aired yet. There was no edition of the show yet, right? They just want to launch it in August, right? But they already have a lot of material prepared, right? They have some sample episodes, they have some pilot shows, right? They have notes from the editorial meetings, they have lots of stuff, and they release it all, daily or weekly for 2 or 3 months and get feedback from the NPR audience. And works very well. They already have, they graduated. That's the show they're working on right now, the Bryant Park project. Bryant Park, is a park in New York. But, they also, one of the shows graduated. So they basically launched a very successful show based on this model of community interaction. Right? And people just by recommending them, this is what you see, you can read the lines, and they released notes from an editorial meeting, right, devoted to the show, and then people can comment on that. There was also this very interesting project, Radio Open Source, where actually it wasn't that much open source as the title suggests, but nevertheless, listeners and the audience could actually recommend, they could pitch, you see this is a pitch, sort of a pitch page, where the audience can actually pitch show ideas. We say, well, you guys should go and do a show about, dictatorship in Zimbabwe, right? And then if the community decides to, if the editors decide to accept it as a show idea, then they would work with the community to generate ideas on whom they should invite to the show, what topics they should cover, what other sort of potential topics they can discuss at the show, all that kind of stuff. Again, that was all decided by the community. It was a very nice project running for 2 years. They ran out of money, I'm afraid, so they're on a holiday now and nobody knows what's going to happen in September. But again, as an innovator, that was the first show of that sort that I know of that, was mildly successful. I'll probably skip over this last part about prediction markets, which I'll just say very, very briefly. The last part of the innovation sort of sphere that I want to talk about had to do with innovation, right? With prediction markets, with how communities can actually change strategies. And one of the ways was prediction markets, right? Those of you familiar with prediction markets probably know, what I have in mind. Those of you who don't, well,